So here we go, February 7th. I'm actually pretty doggone excited about this one. So this video, I did about, I don't know how many, 17, 18 videos, and one of them actually ended by saying maybe this is the last one. And it was along that line of thinking. And that line of thinking was introducing Vedanta, Hinduism, and Buddhism. And it was also going, in essence, it was trying to describe a lot of experiences that I had, but it was really just quotes from the great sages and gurus and how those things sorted out challenges, obstacles, and also helped me along my path. And it ended really with, here's how I meditate, it just kind of ended is what it did. But then some time went by, and there's just so many great quotes from the great gurus and sages, and I love them. And it really occurred to me as I look at this that there's millions and millions of great quotes, but only certain ones create a reaction in each individual. So these ones that I brought up created great reactions in me, mainly because of what I've experienced in life. And I needed that truth to come out. I needed that truth to be injected. And so some of these, like today's, I've brought up to my wife and some friends, and they also were really found this one to be really interesting. So and as a result, I really wanted to bring it up. I wanted to give the quote and recognize who it came from. So this one I'm going to call your natural tendency, your path, your dharma. In fact, since I just used that word, let me just put dharma up here real quick. So dharma has, and I had a hard time really understanding this word. Inside I knew it meant. It meant your natural tendency, your duty. But one of the reasons I had a difficult time with it is that in the religions of India specifically, it depends upon what group. Is it Buddhist? Is it what path of Hinduism? Is it Vedanta? So there's so many different definitions, but I like this, and this is how I'm using it. Right off the bat, the implication of dharma is that there's a right or true way for each person to carry out their life in order to serve both themselves and others. Dharma is closely related to the concepts of duty and selfless service. I just don't think it can be any more simple than that. So when I use dharma, and in the quotes, interestingly, the quotes might even have different variations, but we've talked about, or I've mentioned many times, I think one of the greatest quotes from Vedanta Hinduism is many paths, same consciousness, many paths, same God, many paths, same truth. And that your path is yours and yours alone. And it needs to fit your natural tendency. So now I'm using this word. It needs to fit your natural tendency, your dharma, your character. And then it'll work. And so there's this fascinating quote. So let me take that away. A fascinating quote. And it's throughout these various books. I mean, this is just so basic, but it's so beautiful. And it comes, the Bhagavad Gita. And this one's with Christopher Isherwood. I like that one because I can't read the Bhagavad Gita as is. I'm just not bright enough, I guess. But I can read his words. Christopher Isherwood wrote this 1970, 1960. And then this one by Vivekananda, who I just love. And so they quote, it's from chapter 3 in the Gita. And I'm applying this to life in general, but also your spiritual path. But this, well, let me just go ahead and bring it up. This applies as a business consultant and in where I worked 40 and 50 years ago. I saw this in action. And what I mean is, well, let me just go ahead and read it and we'll discuss it. It says, even a wise man acts according to the tendencies of his own nature. It is better to do your own duty, however imperfectly, than to assume the duties of another person, however successfully. Incredible statements here. Another paragraph in the same area. Better die in your own path than attempt the path of another. And that was a subquote by Krishna. That is my path, and I am down here, and you are way up there, and I'm always tempted to give up my path thinking I will go there and be with you. That's a huge mistake. Better die in your own path than attempt the path of another. I think this is extraordinary. Therefore, the next paragraph, better die working out your own religion than following another's natural religion, however great it may appear to you. Now, I'm sure there's all sorts of religious folks that'll get all angry with me on that. But these were from those two books, Swami Vivekananda and Christopher Isherwood. And I got to tell you, I've seen this in action so many times as a business consultant, but also 40 years ago when we were doing well and people were doing their jobs according to what they were naturally good at. And my recollection is that it was enjoyable. It was easy. And I know what I was doing was my natural tendency. But as soon as we were, and I've seen this in business, so I'll just speak in business in general, when people are forced into doing outside of their dharma, outside of their path, their natural tendency, how quickly things fell apart. In fact, I'll tell you, this is really interesting. I had a friend that I was just helping with a business, and we were examining some of his numbers and his financials. God, this was a long time ago. And he said, I don't know what happened. We just fell apart. And I asked him what happened on this specific date, which is when his numbers went south, to say the least. And he said, well, I fired my receptionist and replaced her with somebody that was really, really smart. And I said, well, I don't know what happened, but you collapsed. And maybe this person is really, really smart, but is she a PR personality? Is she the kind that attracts people and causes people to want to come in? And he said, oh, no, she's not that at all. And I said, well, why don't you just put call up that person that you had on 2 months ago when you terminated her, see if she'll come back, and let's see if your business recovers. Sure enough, instant. And that was a whole idea of it's doesn't make somebody wrong or unable if they can't carry out somebody else's responsibility or duty. And to make people wrong, disrespect them because they are not good at somebody else's tendency, they should be doing their own. I don't know how to, I wish I could communicate this better. The quote's perfect. You're better off. Yeah, boy, I could go on and on. People chasing money when that's just not their natural tendency. There's probably some people, I've talked to so many individuals that wanted to be great teachers, but they had to, by their parents' urging, had to chase other jobs because it paid more. And they're miserable in life, and they're having a very difficult time. But see, it's just not their tendency. And the same thing applies in the spiritual path. You're better off to follow your own path. You know, and that's a bit of a, now that I think about it, a bit of a scary comment, because isn't that kind of the challenge in life? To follow, to have the courage. I should have brought up some other quotes. Maybe I was just reading about the great Swami Vivekananda. And I'm just going to paraphrase this, but in the late 1800s, he came to America. I see that Swami Vivekananda brought India and its religious paths to India. And one of the things about him, if you read about that journey when he was a wandering monk through India and then he came to America and basically he was so much in demand to be a lecturer throughout the US and then also Paris and England. But one of the great qualities of him is that he spoke his mind. He spoke the truth. And he was following his dharma, which is really incredible. And so many of the quotes are, he would say exactly what he saw as the truth, even to people that he knew it would cross their preconceived ideas, maybe is the best way to put it. But I don't think it created problems. And it kind of reminds me of another one from Gandhi, where he said he was discussing the situation that he had to address in South Africa in around 1910. And somebody asked him how difficult it was to challenge authority. And he said, well, I might be a minority of one, but the truth is still the truth. I thought that was an incredible, incredible statement. But really, that story there of Vivekananda and then Gandhi is just the challenge and the difficulty it is to be able to stand up and follow your own path or speak the truth as you see it. I'm surely not going to say that everybody should go and quit their job and tell their boss that they're terrible people or something. There is a time for diplomacy, I suppose. What I am just trying to say is here's this fascinating quote. And I think it's very, very powerful. And I have seen it on display in my many, many years of business consulting and prior to that. That if people are allowed to follow their path, as challenging as that might be, that they're going to have more satisfaction and probably be more successful. But it's what they need to do anyway, is follow their path, follow their dharma. There was another interesting quote. This is going to kind of put a spiritual and religious side to it, or spin to it. Wrong word, spin, just a different viewpoint. And that is, there was in the books by Ramakrishna, with the one I've brought up many a times, I'll show it again. Ramakrishna and his disciples, but also in the Gospel of Ramakrishna. And he's talking about one of the great benefactors, the person, the family, in essence, that financed the great temple at Dakshineshwar. And I don't recall his full name, but his name was Mathur, M-A-T-H-U-R. In fact, I'll put this up. He was speaking to Mathur, very, very wealthy. Give you an idea, I guess they went on a pilgrimage and they took 120 people along with, and they rented out 2 or 3 cars of a train to travel these distances with Ramakrishna. I mean, this guy, if you've ever looked at images of Dakshineshwar, that's what they financed. Huge, huge temple complex. But he always wanted to feel ecstasy. He wanted to feel God. And he asked Ramakrishna to show him. And I don't know if I'm going to tell the whole story. It's in the book. It's fantastic. But there is a part in there where Ramakrishna says, you would do much better to wait and be patient, which is a great line. Wait and be patient. We can't force enlightenment. We just can't. We can't enforce self-realization. All we can do is continue to be a good person, continue to meditate and practice, and it will arrive. But he said you'd be much better to wait and be patient, and that anyhow he should keep his life balanced between devotion to God and worldly obligations, that being his dharma. So Mathur, I guess from what the story went, which I kind of shake my head on some of these stories and go, really? But he was in a state, he was given by Ramakrishna, this state of ecstasy, and it lasted 3 days, if I remember correctly. And as enjoyable and wonderful and as fantastic as it was, he was unable to continue working because he was just in this glorious state. And so he asked Ramakrishna, please put me back to normal, or something to that effect. I'm sure I'm westernizing the story grossly. But I think that's an amazing statement, this right here. You'd be much better to wait and be patient, and that anyhow, he should keep his life balanced between devotion to God and worldly obligations, that being his dharma. Why do I think that's incredible? I mean, I think the story is fantastic, but what's incredible about it is that we all have to go our own path and we have to go our own pace. And having it pushed, even pushing it on ourselves, can be a mistake. We have to have patience also. And we also have to live in the world, and that's that whole idea of being a householder and not a monk. A householder has to have a balance between our spiritual path and our obligations in life. Obviously, we'll use different words here in the U.S., but so I thought that was a great quote. But again, they're using that whole word of dharma. And I just think it's astounding. I know when I talk to people, as my sons grew up and as I talk to them, but as I talk to their friends or whatever, I wouldn't use this quote, but I would talk to them and say, you know, you're always better off finding your tendency and your path than chasing somebody else's path, especially the money path. My goodness. It was sad to me, another little story on that. My brother, who taught law, and he was telling me that there were some professors at one of these universities that, because they were living in a very affluent area, that they weren't able to afford a home. But here was, they loved teaching law, but they weren't able to afford the area they lived in. And it made me think about that. What a challenge. Here are these people that found their dharma, found what they wanted to do, their path, but they weren't able to do it in that specific area. It was just too costly. Of course, my answer would be, go where you can raise your family and take care of things and follow your dharma. You know, you don't have to be in some outrageously expensive community. But anyway, it's that application of dharma and your path. And maybe that, you know, that can be applied to so many different things from, yeah. So I think this is a fascinating quote. I think it's a fascinating statement. It sure answered a lot of questions of areas in my life where I was extremely challenged. I wish sometimes I did stand up and as Vivekananda stood up and said, here's the truth. And there were some times that I did, and you know what? It always worked out. And there were times that I didn't, and you know what? It didn't work out. But I'm not embarrassed or, yeah, that's the past. Water under the bridge, they say. But I look back and I think it's really interesting. Very powerful quote. And I wonder if anybody's going to watch this video and go, ooh, boy, that's a good one. Follow your path. There you go.